I secretly planned the perfect romantic dinner to reunite my divorced parents in our Chicago family Brownstone. While setting up candles and jazz music, I discovered hidden documents proving they'd been plotting for months to ship me off to military school in Virginia and sell our three-generation family home to fund their secret new relationships with people I'd never even met or heard about. What I did with that stack of evidence at dinner destroyed their perfect plan and changed our family forever. I recreated my parents' first date to surprise them with a perfect romantic evening, then slid them a stack of papers and watched their faces drop in horror. My parents, Elena and Michael, divorced 4 years ago when my mother supposedly had an affair. But honestly, I never fully believed that story. They always seemed way too connected to be unfaithful. Even after they split, Mom still came around to our Chicago Brownstone pretty regularly to check on things or share coffee with Dad. They'd joke around and act friendly enough to confuse anyone who saw them together. To me, it felt like they had unfinished business hanging between them. A few weeks ago, my dad asked me to check something on his MacBook while he was making dinner. He always kept his iPhone synced to his computer, so text messages constantly popped up on the screen. Usually I ignored them completely, but one message caught my attention. It was from my mom. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. It'll be just like the old days." My heart jumped into my throat. That message was way more than friendly. It sounded exactly like how they used to talk before everything fell apart. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I became obsessed with the idea that maybe they secretly missed each other. Maybe they were finally realizing they'd made a huge mistake. I was 17, and I had missed having a real family more than anything. I decided I was going to help them get back together, whether they realized they wanted it or not. Their first date had been right here in this house. Homemade pasta, candlelight, Miles Davis records spinning on the vintage turntable. I figured I could recreate it perfectly. My dad still lived in our original family Brownstone, and my mom still had her keys. I told her I needed help with a history project about the 1960s, and I begged my dad to keep Friday evening free because I wanted a father-son dinner. Neither of them suspected anything. In the days leading up to it, I felt more confident. I was sure they'd fall right back into old habits once they saw what I'd prepared. The dining room would be perfect, the music would transport them back, and they'd remember why they fell in love. But cleaning out the dining room to set up the romantic scene, I found something strange tucked behind the photo albums on the built-in bookshelf. It was a stack of papers from Midwest Realty Group. Offers, emails, purchase agreements about selling our brownstone. My stomach dropped instantly. My dad had never mentioned moving anywhere. I felt panicked and confused. I searched more carefully when he wasn't home and found even worse things. There were applications for military academies hidden in his desk drawer. One in Virginia near my mom's sister, another in South Carolina, where it seemed like my dad planned to relocate. They'd written notes to each other about how to break it to Tyler gently, and once everything's finalized, I realized with a sickening feeling they'd been secretly planning this for months. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I dug deeper into my dad's computer, and there I found emails about new relationships. Both of my parents had serious partners, people I'd never even heard of. Elena was seeing someone named David, a financial advisor. Michael had been dating someone called Rachel, a real estate agent. They planned to each buy condos and move in with their new partners right after selling our brownstone and shipping me off to military school. My chest ached with betrayal and embarrassment at my stupid reunion dinner plan. I wanted to cancel everything at first, but instead I decided they deserved to know I'd found out, and in the most epic way possible. I printed every email, every application, and every text message I could find. I prepared everything meticulously. When they both arrived Friday evening, they looked stunned to see the candles and hear Miles Davis playing softly. My mom smiled nervously. My dad frowned suspiciously. "What's this?" he asked, his voice cautious. "Oh, it's nothing special," I replied, telling them to sit down at the dining table. Right as they settled into their chairs, I sat with them too. Without wasting any time, I pushed the thick stack of papers toward them. My hands were shaking so badly I had to keep them under the table. Neither of them said anything at first, but my mom looked sick and my dad's jaw tightened. "Quietly," I said. "I know what you've been planning behind my back." They tried to stay calm initially, saying this was all for my benefit and that I'd understand when I was older. That's when I dropped my final card. I already called Grandma Rose. She still owns part of this house and said she'll never let you sell it. That was a complete bluff, but I had to play it. The room went completely silent. Then my dad exploded. He shouted at me, calling me selfish and manipulative. My mom jumped in with tears in her eyes, saying that I was the reason they divorced, that having me had ruined their marriage. I stared at her, too shocked to speak. But then it got worse. They kept going, their words getting nastier. They said I was an accident, that neither of them ever wanted kids, and I destroyed their marriage from day one. I tried to argue back, but my voice broke and the room spun around me. Their words cut deep, tearing apart everything I'd ever believed about my family. I couldn't take any more. My throat tightened. I stood up, knocking the chair over behind me, and ran upstairs. My dad yelled after me that Grandma Rose wouldn't stop anything, that they'd make sure the house was sold no matter what. I slammed my bedroom door and collapsed on my bed, sobbing harder than I ever had before. I could taste salt and feel my whole body shaking with the force of my crying. I stayed in my room for hours that night. My parents didn't even try to check on me. I heard them downstairs arguing about damage control and timelines. At one point I heard my mom on the phone with someone, probably David, complaining about the situation. They were already moving forward with their plans. The next morning, my dad knocked on my door and told me to pack a bag. His voice was cold, businesslike. He said I was going to military school immediately, and they'd already called to arrange early admission. I refused to open the door. I told him I wasn't going anywhere. He got angry and said I didn't have a choice, that I was still a minor and had to do what they said. That's when I realized I needed help fast. I waited until I heard him leave for work, his Honda Civic engine fading down the street, and snuck downstairs to grab the landline. My mom was in the kitchen making coffee like nothing had happened. She didn't even look at me. The familiar smell of her hazelnut creamer made my stomach turn. I called my grandma Rose from the bathroom with the water running. She answered on the second ring, and I broke down crying as soon as I heard her voice. She'd always been my safe place, the one who actually wanted to hear about my day and my dreams. I told her everything, about the house sale and the military school plans. She went quiet for a long time. Then she said she'd be over that afternoon and we'd figure this out together. Her voice was steel when she added, "Don't let them take you anywhere." My mom must have heard me on the phone because she was waiting outside the bathroom when I came out. She grabbed my arm hard enough to leave marks and told me I was making a huge mistake. She said Grandma Rose couldn't help me, and I was only making things worse for myself. Her perfectly manicured nails dug into my skin. I pulled away from her and ran back to my room, locking the door behind me. I spent the morning going through more of their papers. I found documents that looked official with signatures I didn't recognize. Some of them had my Grandma Rose's name on them, but the signature looked nothing like hers. I'd seen her sign birthday cards enough times to know her handwriting. My hands started shaking again. Were they really forging documents to sell the house? The house that had been in our family for 3 generations? I took photos of everything with my phone, emailing them to myself and to an old Gmail account I'd forgotten about, just in case they tried to delete the evidence. Around noon, my dad came home unexpectedly. I heard his car pull up in the driveway, the familiar sound of his engine cutting off followed by the slam of his car door. My heart started racing as I quickly hid the papers under my mattress, smoothing the comforter to hide any telltale lumps. He knocked on my door again, harder this time, each rap making me flinch. When I didn't answer, he used his master key to unlock it. I'd forgotten he had one. He stood in my doorway, looking tired and angry, his tie loosened and his usually neat hair disheveled. He told me to get dressed because we were leaving for the school tour in an hour. I said I wasn't going. He grabbed my arm and pulled me off the bed, not hard enough to really hurt, but firm enough to scare me. That's when we heard a car in the driveway. My Grandma Rose had arrived early. My dad's face went pale, the color draining from his cheeks like water from a sink. He let go of my arm and rushed downstairs, taking the steps 2 at a time. I followed close behind, my socks sliding on the hardwood floor. My Grandma Rose was already at the front door when my mom opened it. Grandma looked older than I remembered, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, new lines around her eyes. But her eyes were sharp and angry, blazing with a fury I'd rarely seen. She pushed past my mom without saying hello and came straight to me. She hugged me tight and whispered that everything would be okay. Her familiar lavender perfume wrapped around me like a protective shield. My parents tried to act normal at first. They offered her coffee and said this was all a misunderstanding. My Grandma Rose wasn't buying it. She sat down at the kitchen table and told them to explain why they were selling her house without permission. My dad said she'd signed the papers months ago. That's when I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos of the forged signatures. Her face went red, a deep crimson spreading from her neck to her cheeks. She stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor, the sound cutting through the tense silence. The argument that followed was intense. My Grandma Rose accused them of fraud and elder abuse. My parents kept insisting the signatures were real. They said she was getting confused in her old age. That made her even angrier. She pulled out her phone and called someone. I couldn't hear who, but she used her lawyer voice, the one she'd used when she worked as a paralegal before retiring. My parents exchanged worried looks, their confident facades beginning to crack. After she hung up, she told them her attorney would be reviewing all the documents. She also said she was taking me home with her until this was sorted out. My mom started crying, saying they were just trying to give me a better life. My dad accused Grandma Rose of poisoning me against them. The whole time, I just sat there feeling numb. These people screaming at each other didn't feel like my family anymore. My parents refused to let me leave with Grandma Rose. They said they had custody, and she couldn't just take me. Grandma said she'd call the police if she had to. The tension in the room was suffocating, pressing down on all of us like a physical weight. Finally, my dad said I could go for one night, but I had to be back tomorrow. He made it sound like he was doing us a favor. I ran upstairs to pack while they kept arguing. I grabbed clothes and my laptop and the stack of evidence I'd collected. I could hear them downstairs, still going at it, their voices rising and falling like waves. My mom was sobbing now, saying we were ruining everything. My dad kept talking about timelines and contracts. I felt sick listening to them talk about me like I was a problem to be solved instead of their son. The drive to Grandma Rose's house was quiet. She lived about 30 minutes away in Lincoln Park, in a smaller house she'd bought after Grandpa died. I'd spent countless weekends there as a kid. It still smelled like vanilla and old books. She made me a grilled cheese sandwich and we sat at her kitchen table. She asked me to tell her everything from the beginning, so I did. I told her about finding the papers and the emails about their new relationships. I told her about the military school applications and their plan to sell the house. She listened without interrupting, her hands wrapped around her coffee mug. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she told me the house was special. My great-grandparents had built it in 1954. She and my grandpa had raised my dad there. When Grandpa died, he'd left the house to both her and my dad with the understanding it would stay in the family. She'd never signed any papers to sell it. She was certain of that. That afternoon, her lawyer came over. His name was William, and he looked serious in his Navy suit. He reviewed all the photos I'd taken of the documents. He kept shaking his head and making notes on a yellow legal pad. After an hour, he said there was definitely something illegal going on. The signatures were clearly forged, and some of the documents had been altered. He said we needed the originals to build a strong case. He also said I should stay with Grandma Rose for now, for my own safety. The next few days were a whirlwind. My parents tried everything to get me back. They showed up at Grandma Rose's house multiple times. They called William's office making threats. They even had their new partners call, trying to smooth things over. Rachel left a voicemail saying she understood I was upset, but running away wasn't the answer. David sent flowers with a card about looking forward to being my stepfather. I threw them in the trash. Then my parents changed tactics. They started being nice. My mom sent texts saying she was sorry and just wanted to talk. My dad left voicemails about missing me and wanting to work things out. For a moment, I almost believed them. Then my friend Jake told me he'd overheard them at Starbucks talking about their lawyer, saying they needed to look sympathetic. It was all an act again. Friday morning, we got word that the house sale had been officially blocked. The real estate company pulled out when William sent them evidence of the forged documents. They didn't want any part of potential fraud. My parents were furious. My dad called Grandma Rose, screaming about lawsuits and ruining his life. She hung up on him. An hour later, a process server showed up with papers. My parents were suing for full custody and demanding I return home immediately. William said not to worry. The evidence we had would help our case, but he also warned that family court could be unpredictable. Judges usually wanted kids with their parents. We needed to be prepared for a fight. Over the next few weeks, something unexpected happened. People started coming forward to support us. Our neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, called Grandma Rose. She lived across from our brownstone and had seen everything over the years. She was willing to testify about what she'd witnessed. The time she'd seen me home alone for hours while my parents were out with their new partners. The arguments she'd overheard. The moving trucks that had already started showing up before I found out about their plan. More people came forward over the next few days. My English teacher called to say she'd noticed changes in my behavior recently and was concerned. The parent who carpooled with us said my mom had mentioned military school months ago, like it was already decided. Even Jake officially offered to testify about what he'd overheard at Starbucks. My parents had been so confident in their plan, they'd gotten sloppy. William was building a strong case. Between the forged documents, the witness statements, and their deception, my parents looked terrible. The hearing was set for the following Wednesday. William said judges didn't like granting emergency custody changes, but we had a shot given the circumstances. I tried not to get my hopes up, but it was hard not to feel optimistic. The courthouse was bigger than I expected. All glass and steel and echoing hallways. My parents were already there with their lawyer when we arrived. They wouldn't look at me. Their new partners were there too, sitting behind them. Rachel kept checking her phone. David was reading some business magazine. They looked bored, like this was just another inconvenient appointment. The hearing started at 10 a.m. sharp. The judge was an older woman with gray hair pulled back tight. She looked tired already. William presented our case first. He laid out everything. The forged documents, the witness statements, the secret plans. He showed the text from my parents about shipping me away. The judge examined each piece of evidence carefully, occasionally asking questions. My parents' lawyer tried to spin it differently. He said this was all a misunderstanding, and that teenagers often overreact to change. He claimed Grandma Rose was turning me against my parents. The judge asked him about the forged signatures directly. He stammered something about mistaken identity and unclear documentation. Even he didn't seem to believe what he was saying. Then came the testimony. Mrs. Patterson went first. She talked about seeing me home alone constantly while my parents were out. She mentioned the time she found me sitting on the front steps at 11 p.m. because I'd locked myself out and couldn't reach either parent. My mom's face went red at that. The judge took notes the whole time. Jake testified next about what he'd overheard at Starbucks. The arguments about shipping me away. The comments about how much easier life would be without a kid around. He even remembered specific dates and times. My English teacher spoke about the changes she'd noticed in my behavior and grades. How I'd gone from a happy kid to withdrawn and anxious. She'd tried reaching out to my parents, but they'd never returned her calls. Finally, it was my turn to speak. The judge asked me directly where I wanted to live. I told her about finding the documents and realizing my parents had been planning this for months. I talked about how they'd said I ruined their marriage and they never wanted kids. My voice cracked a few times, but I got through it. The judge asked if I felt safe with Grandma Rose. I said it was the first time I'd felt safe in years. The judge said she'd review everything and make a decision within 48 hours. Court was adjourned. We all filed out in awkward silence. Outside the courthouse, my dad approached me. Rachel tried to hold him back, but he shrugged her off. He said this didn't have to be so ugly and we could still work something out. I just stared at him. Did he really think I'd fall for that now? Grandma Rose stepped between us and told him to communicate through lawyers only. He looked like he wanted to argue, but Rachel dragged him away. The next 2 days crawled by. I tried to distract myself with homework and TV, but nothing worked. Grandma Rose baked enough cookies to feed an army. Neither of us could eat much. Thursday afternoon, the call finally came. William sounded excited, which had to be good. The judge had granted temporary guardianship to Grandma Rose. The house sale was permanently blocked. My parents were ordered to pay Grandma Rose's legal fees. They also had to attend counseling if they wanted any future custody consideration. I collapsed on the couch in relief. It was over. At least this part was. The judge had written a scathing opinion about parents who put their own desires above their child's well-being. She'd specifically mentioned the forged documents as showing a pattern of deception and manipulation. My parents had 60 days to appeal, but William said they had no grounds. That night we ordered deep dish pizza to celebrate. It was the first meal I'd actually tasted in weeks. We even got fortune cookies. Mine said new paths lead to unexpected happiness. Grandma Rose's said family is built on truth and love. We laughed at how perfectly they fit our situation. For the first time in months, I felt like maybe things would actually be okay. My parents went silent after the ruling. No calls, no texts, no showing up at the door. It was eerie, but also peaceful. I started at Lincoln Park High the following Monday. It was weird being the new kid, but also kind of nice. Nobody knew my drama. I could just be normal for a while. 2 weeks later, Jake texted me that he'd seen moving trucks at the Brownstone. My parents were packing up, apparently deciding to move anyway, just separately. My dad was still going to South Carolina with Rachel. My mom was moving in with David across town. The house would stay in the family but sit empty for now. William filed paperwork to make Grandma Rose's guardianship permanent. My parents didn't contest it. They'd apparently decided fighting was too expensive and damaging to their reputations. Part of me was hurt they gave up so easily, but mostly, I was relieved. The constant battle was exhausting. A month after the hearing, my mom reached out. She sent a long email apologizing for what she'd said that night. She claimed she didn't mean it, and was just angry and scared. She wanted to meet for coffee to talk. I stared at that email for hours. Grandma Rose said it was my choice, but to be careful. I decided to wait. I wasn't ready to forgive yet. My dad never apologized. He sent a birthday card 2 months later with a generic message and a check. No personal note or anything. I cashed the check and donated the money to a local youth shelter. It felt good to turn something from him into help for other kids going through hard times. The house situation got resolved eventually. Since Grandma Rose was part owner and I'd inherit my dad's portion someday, we decided to rent it out. The income would go into a college fund for me. It felt right that the house that nearly tore our family apart would instead help build my future. William found good tenants, a young family with twin boys. I visited the house one last time before the renters moved in. It looked exactly the same, but felt completely different. The dining room, where everything exploded, was just a room now. My bedroom, where I'd cried myself to sleep, was empty and echoing. I grabbed a few things I'd forgotten, but mostly, I just said goodbye. This wasn't my home anymore. 6 months later, I was doing okay. Not great, but okay. I had friends at school and my grades were back up. Grandma Rose and I had settled into a routine. She gave me more freedom than my parents ever had, but also clearer boundaries. We ate dinner together every night and talked about our days. It was nice having someone actually interested in my life. The anniversary of the confrontation dinner came around faster than expected. I'd been dreading it, but when the day came, it was just another Tuesday. Grandma Rose made pasta for dinner. Not as a cruel joke, but because she'd forgotten the significance. We laughed about it later. Sometimes the best way to deal with bad memories is to make new ones. My parents kept reaching out sporadically. My mom sent occasional emails updating me on her life with David. They were engaged now. She invited me to the wedding. I didn't respond. My dad sent texts about the weather in South Carolina and his new job. Surface level stuff. Neither of them tried to rebuild an actual relationship. I started seeing a therapist to work through everything. She helped me understand that my parents' issues weren't my fault. They'd been unhappy long before making their secret plan. I was just easier to blame than accepting their own failures. It didn't excuse what they did, but it helped me stop blaming myself. Slowly, I began to heal. Senior year arrived, and college applications loomed. Grandma Rose and I toured schools together. She'd never gotten to do that with my dad since he'd gone straight to work after high school. She was living vicariously through me, and I didn't mind. We had fun road tripping to different campuses and trying local food. It felt like the family trips I'd missed out on. I got into Northwestern, my top choice. 3 hours away, far enough to be independent, but close enough to come home for Sunday dinners. Grandma Rose cried when the acceptance came. Happy tears this time. Between her savings and the rental income, I would need loans. My parents' betrayal had accidentally set me up for success. Graduation day arrived, and I'd invited my parents, not because I'd forgiven them, but because I wanted them to see what they'd missed. They both came, sitting separately with their new partners. They looked uncomfortable being in the same room. Meanwhile, I was surrounded by friends, teachers who'd supported me, and of course, Grandma Rose in the front row. After the ceremony, my mom approached cautiously. She congratulated me and said she was proud. I thanked her politely and turned to take pictures with friends. She stood there for a moment looking lost, then walked away. My dad waved from across the gymnasium but didn't come over. Rachel whispered something to him, and they left. That summer before college, I helped clean out Grandma Rose's attic. We found boxes of old photos from when my dad was young. Pictures of family vacations and birthday parties, and normal, happy moments. Grandma Rose asked if I wanted any. I picked out a few from before everything went wrong. One. Not because I missed those times, but as reminders that even good things can end if you're not careful. The night before I left for college, Grandma Rose made my favorite meal. We sat at her kitchen table where so many important conversations had happened. She told me she was proud of how I'd handled everything, that I'd shown more maturity than adults twice my age. I moved into my dorm on a sunny August day. Grandma Rose helped me unpack and set up my room. As she hugged me goodbye, she slipped an envelope into my hand. Inside was a letter telling me how much she loved me and how I'd saved her from a lonely retirement. 2 weeks into freshman year, I got a text from an unknown number. It was my dad, saying he hoped college was going well. I stared at it for a while, then deleted it. Maybe someday I'll be ready to reconnect, but not yet. I have a new life to build first. One where I choose my own family instead of being stuck with the one I was born into. Looking back now, that dinner I'd planned to reunite my parents actually saved me. If I hadn't found those documents, I'd be at some military academy right now. My parents would have sold the house and moved on with their lives. Instead, I got to stay with someone who actually wanted me around. Sometimes the worst nights lead to the best outcomes. Oh, and that fancy military academy in Virginia my parents picked out? It shut down last year for financial fraud. Guess they weren't great at research either. I laughed when I saw the news article. Grandma Rose baked a cake to celebrate the irony. We ate the whole thing while watching movies. It was a good night.